Hey y'all, I'm Tammy, and this is Collard Valley Cooks. This is one of the most important recipes you could ever watch to learn how to be a great cook for Thanksgiving Day. My mama's chicken and dressing is the best I've ever tasted, and I've tasted a lot of them. Let's get started. If you've never used milk and you've never used cream of chicken and maybe even the fluffy bread, it creates the most delicious fluffy dressing you've ever tasted. What is so great about that is you can make this dressing drive 2 hours to serve it. It cooled down and it still dipped out of the pan nice and fluffy. It never gets dense. That's what I love about my mama's chicken and dressing. How to boil a chicken is in our master cookbook. It's recipe number 116. Now that recipe is used in many of my other recipes as a base. So if you want to know how to make some good chicken broth or bone broth, you will follow that recipe. Now, your first step in making my chicken and dressing is to boil a chicken, and it's going to produce about 2 quarts of broth and the whole chicken's meat off the bones, okay? And you're going to use this in your dressing. It's smart to make it a day ahead. Each of these quarts is about 4 cups. You're going to be using about 5.5 cups of this broth. If you don't want to make chicken and dressing and you don't want to boil a chicken, then buy the bone broth in the containers and make sure you get 2 of them because there's just 4 cups in one, okay? If you do decide to make your broth with recipe 116, make sure you buy a young fryer chicken, okay? Do not use a baking hen. A baking hen is bigger and you may think you'll get more meat and stuff from it, but it'll be rubbery because they're older, okay? The meat will be rubbery if you boil it or fry it. So don't do that. They're for baking in the oven. All right, you're going to start with 6 tablespoons of salted butter, and I'm going to melt that in the microwave. You got 2 cups of buttermilk, 1 egg, some cooking oil, it's a 1/4 cup, and then you've got 3 cups of cornmeal mix, and it's self-rising white lily cornmeal mix. Now, this will fit. I will grease the pan, and I was going to show you guys that a dressing pan is a little larger than a 13 by 9. You can see the difference in the two together, okay? So that one fits inside a regular lasagna or dressing pan. This is what you're going to cook your cornbread in. Okie dokie, we have melted our butter. Now we're going to add 2 cups of buttermilk, and that's whole buttermilk if you've got it. If you live in an area where you can't get buttermilk, you can use sour cream in place of it. Just use the same amount. This is a 1/4 cup of cooking oil, and I'm using corn oil today. 1 egg. And then 3 cups of this self-rising cornmeal mix. Just 1, 2, 3. And we're going to mix that together. Now you can beat your wet ingredients first. Make sure you get that egg mixed up, but if you mix it, it's going to get mixed in there. A lot of people, when they mix stuff, will add the dry ingredients to the bottom and then add the wet ingredients to the top. And it really don't matter what order you mix it in. But I find that if I put the wet ingredients on the bottom, then I don't wind up having a little bit of flour or something that don't get mixed in on the bottom. You got to really scrape that bottom and get it mixed in good. And because this is whole buttermilk, it looks thick. If you were using a different buttermilk, it'd be a little bit thinner. I might just add just a tiny bit of water. I don't have to, but because my buttermilk was so thick, I'm gonna add just a little bit to it. And that's not in the cookbook as a tip. You just want it to be about the same consistency every time you mix it up. And the consistency you want is like what you see here. Perfect. If I had used low-fat buttermilk, it would have been just like this. All right, and you can use either one. Now I am going to grease my dressing pan with Crisco. You don't have to use Crisco, it's just what Mama always did and Granny when they made their dressing, so that's what I do. This is going to be added to our pan. We're going to get this in the oven, and I cook cornbread for dressing at a lower temperature because I don't like for it to get real brown. Mama never did. She said it made the dressing taste bad. So I cook it on 350 degrees instead of a high temperature like you normally would make cornbread on, because this is going to be used for dressing. All right, we're going to get this in the oven and get it to baking. All right, so you're going to need a cup of onion and a cup of chopped celery. Now, I do not recommend that you saute your celery and onion because you want it to have a really nice, strong flavor in your dressing. And if you saute it, it makes it more subtle, okay? And you don't want that. You want it to have a nice, delicious flavor of onion and celery. And if someone don't like onion and celery, you can use a pull chopper and chop them really small. And that way they don't really know they're in there, but the flavor's in there. So you need a cup of onion and a cup of chopped celery. Y'all are going to love this dressing. It is absolutely amazing. If someone on here has made it before and you know how good it is, please comment and let people know that it's delicious. And as far as the celery goes, I do like to use a few leaves on the celery. I think it makes it look really pretty in the dressing. So I try to get a few that has leaves on them for the dressing too. I usually split them right up the middle and then I chop them. Unless they're really big, and then I make them into third strips, at least 3 strips. This adds just a little bit of color to your dressing. And it's just absolutely delicious. The dressing does cook a long time. It takes it almost 2 hours to get done. So these vegetables will not be crunchy. They will be soft once the dressing is done. Typically, when I make dressing, I do go over after I chop and go over it several times and chop again. And that way, there's not big hunks of it in your dressing. Just do a good chop. Now, many times, I'll make my cornbread the day before, but I didn't today, so it's nice and hot, and it's going in. Boy, it smells so good. It actually stuck a little bit to the bottom. Guess I didn't put enough grease in there. This is the same pan where we'll make our dressing in. So we'll let it cool over here for a minute. Then we're going to really give it a good greasing, okay? And I think I'm just going to let it cool a minute And then as soon as it gets cooled down a little bit, we're going to throw this together. I don't want it to be this piping hot when we pour stuff over it. So what we might do is chop up our eggs right quick while this is cooling down a little bit. Just kind of spread it out. I hope you got one of these big bowls because they are wonderful for making stuff like this. Wonderful, I mean. So we're going to sit this over here out of the way because it's a smoking hot. Now we've got to chop up our eggs. Okay, the eggs. As far as this goes, Mama always used boiled eggs in her dressing and actually in her giblet gravy. If for some reason you don't like boiled eggs, don't put them in there, but they give it a wonderful flavor. So I would suggest you do. Most people won't even know they're in there, especially if you chop them small. Now, if you're going to freeze your dressing, some people worry about them getting rubbery or hard. I've never had that happen, but if you plan on freezing your dressing, you can just omit them if you're worried about it. I don't omit them, but you can, of course. Now, this is a new little contraption I got, and I just wanted to try it. It is an egg slicer, and it slices them different ways. And so today, we are going to chop them, so I'm going to see how it works. And this is how it works. And what's cool is it's got this little holder, and you just undo it. And there's our chopped egg. Cute. Now, you do have to wash it. So if you don't want to wash it, then, of course, just use a knife, chop up your egg in your hand. Or use an old-fashioned kind. This is pretty cool. If you're making a lot of eggs, like for egg salad, I think it would work really good. All right, there we have it. All right, on the right of the screen, you will see the ingredients. This recipe, of course, is in our master cookbook, in our first cookbook, if you have an old cookbook. A 10.5-ounce can of cream of chicken soup. A lot of people are like, well, if you start with that, I'm not making this dressing. If you don't want to make this newer, updated Cadillac version that was my mother's, you can make my granny's. She has old day-old biscuits and no can of cream of chicken soup. And that's the old-fashioned kind. So I have both kinds of dressing, and don't worry if that's the kind you want to use, then just look up that recipe. All right? You're going to use 4 slices of loaf bread. Now, I'm going to chop these up in cubes. If you're using regular loaf bread, use about 5 slices. You're going to have a cup of chopped onion and a cup of chopped celery. You're going to have McCormick's poultry seasoning, and I recommend McCormick's. And poultry seasoning's main ingredient is sage. So a lot of you, if you're like, well, I use sage, that's fine. You can substitute it with sage, but it'd probably take a little bit less sage, okay? I'm using 3/4 teaspoon of poultry seasoning, so if you use sage, you might want to use about a 1/2 teaspoon and give it a taste and decide if that's good enough for you. A tablespoon of chicken bouillon, and it's granules. You're going to be using a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and pepper, 3 raw eggs. You're going to be using about 5.5 cups of this broth. Believe it or not, you're going to be using 2 cups of milk. And a lot of people are like, I've never put milk in my dressing. It makes it nice and creamy and fluffy and delicious. So don't leave out the milk. A lot of you want to replace it with broth, but I'm telling you, if you put the milk in there, you'll be glad you did. All right, we need about 5.5 cups of chicken broth. And this is a 8-cup bowl, and it's got measurements on it. If you don't have a batter bowl, they're wonderful. I want this fat in there too. So let me get that in there. It'll make it delicious. And making dressing is not near as time consuming if you do go ahead and make your chicken the day before. All right, it's time to put it all together. Are y'all ready? We'll start with this. Maybe when it hits that warmer cornbread, it won't freeze me to death when I do a mix. There's our broth. If you skipped over some steps and you're not watching the whole video, you missed some tips about the onion and celery. I do recommend not to saute them because you want them to have a nice rich flavor, and that will make them settle. Onion. You need a cup of chopped onion and celery, and they need to be chopped small. And they will become soft while they're baking. Now, I know I'm repeating some of this, but not everybody watches the whole video, and I like to make sure they hear some of the tips. This is 3 raw eggs from our chickens, the boiled eggs, 3 boiled eggs chopped, 2 cups of milk, half teaspoon of salt, half teaspoon of pepper, 3/4 teaspoons of poultry seasoning, McCormick, a tablespoon of chicken bouillon granules, a can of cream of chicken soup. All right, we're going to just take our bread and make it into cubes. So this is 5 slices of white bread. This is Italian. You can use any kind you want to. I just wouldn't recommend using the kind that has seeds in it. All right, now my granny, instead of using the cubed loaf bread, always use day-old biscuits. If you have day-old biscuits and you want to use them, you can always use those instead of loaf bread, but make sure you put some bread in there. All right, we're going to mix this up, and then we're going to add our loaf bread and our chicken. And it should be quite runny. Do a really good job mixing because that can of cream of chicken soup is in there and you don't want it stuck in one place in your dressing, okay? And it's thick, so you got to mix this well. You can use your hands if you want to. I like to use a flat spatula and just kind of press it down against the bottom, and that way you know you're going to break up those raw eggs and you're going to break up that cream of chicken soup. So you want to really get this mixed in there good. Now we're going to throw in our bread cubes and our chicken. Now, if you're just making dressing, you don't have to use the chicken in the dressing, but Mama always did. It makes it taste good, and it's a meal in itself. So we're just going to chop this up a little bit. Now this was a big chicken. I may not use all of it. That is a lot of chicken. I may save it a little bit of this chicken for me and Chris to make a little nachos or meal with. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and grease this pan really good. Give it a good thick greasing. Now, if you want to, you can use a nice big pretty lasagna dish, but now I just use a plain old dish like Granny did. Sometimes I use a lasagna dish. It's according to who's coming, who I'm trying to impress. I'm just going to use my hand, y'all. It's a lot. If for some reason there's too much and you can't get it all in your pan, then just freeze a little bit and make it in a small pan for you later for 1 or 2 people. Actually, I'm going to have more than I need. And it'll rise just a little bit. So you want it about a 1/2 inch. You want it to be about a 1/2 inch from the top of the pan. That's about how it should look. It should look kind of jiggly like that and kind of wet on the top. If you make this ahead of time and put it in the refrigerator, make sure you give it a really good mix before you put it in the oven. Also, have it out at room temperature for at least 2 or 3 hours so that it's not freezing cold going into the oven. If you put cold dressing in your oven, it is going to take it maybe even an hour longer to cook. So make sure that you allot for that time and that you're not having people wait because the dressing's not done. My dressing usually takes about 2 hours, okay? All right, 350 degrees. Good old Thanksgiving dressing. There just ain't nothing better than a good chicken and dressing. Chicken and dressing. It's the best you've ever tasted. I have to show y'all how fluffy this is. Now, if you've never used milk and you've never used cream of chicken and maybe even the fluffy bread, it creates the most delicious fluffy dressing you've ever tasted. What is so great about that is you can make this dressing drive 2 hours to serve it. It cooled down and it still dipped out of the pan, nice and fluffy. It never gets dense. That's what I love about my mama's chicken and dressing. Let me show you how pretty this is. It's some pretty stuff. I mean, it's just light and fluffy and delicious. Look at that. Just look at it. And dressing isn't done unless it's cracked all the way across. A lot of people serve their dressing when it's not quite done. That dressing is perfect. Let's get a taste. I've already made my neighbors dressings for Thanksgiving because there was that extra, and me and Chris put it in a baking dish, and I got it in the freezer for them. That's so good. The salt is perfect. The seasoning is perfect. It is absolutely spot on, delicious. And I'm telling you, it'll stay fluffy all day. So if you want to make dressing and you have to make it ahead and you're used to it getting dense and not being easy to serve, if you make this dressing, you will never have that problem. It's the best. I hope you've enjoyed watching Mama's Chicken and Dressing. With all my tips and tricks that I've learned over the years, I had to put them all in there for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Y'all come back and see us at Collard Valley Cooks, where we cook like our mamas did. And we'll see you next time. Love ya. Bye.